Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 17 of our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural. And this is adapted by Walter B. Gibson. Now, and let's see, we're going to go over the copyright information, of course. Let me find it in the book while it's on the screen for you. Let's see, it says Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone is copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited is copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. All rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company, Random House Company, and it gives the address. This book is previously published, or was previously published, as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited. Printed and bound in the United States of America, and this gives all the Library of Congress information if you're interested in that. Anyways, in the last part, something weird happened. It appears that Bag Zaloom, the tiger god, is running rampant. It's a super smart tiger, and I have suspicions that something happened to the Raja, and now he's like, I don't know. We're going to find out. I think this one is almost over. Let me see. Yeah, well, we should be able to get through the rest of it anyways. So, anyways, there have been several incidents of a tiger doing very smart things and untiger-like things. So, we're going to find out more about this, I guess. Let's see. Okay, here. Once the tiger god, for by now all the hunters knew that he must be such, came face to face with Nayudu, the master shikari himself. Like a flash, Nayudu aimed point blank at Bag Zaloom, who was crouching, snarling on an embankment only 30 feet away. Nayudu's moment of hesitation was only to make sure that the kill was the first shot, for he knew that a wounded tiger would only attack more savagely. But in the fleeting instant, there was a stir in the brush almost at Nayudu's feet, and up rose a hooded cobra, ready to strike at the aiming hunter. Instinctively, Nayudu spun around and aimed at the snake instead, only to hear a mighty roar as the tiger profited from the split-second diversion, came springing from its embankment. Nayudu dropped low, and his shot at the cobra went wide. Rolling about, he fired from a prone position at the quarter-ton mass of flying stripes that had hurtled only a few feet above his head. But the crackle of brush sounded ahead of Nayudu's rifle flash, and he knew that he must have missed. When he came to his feet, the hooded snake had also slithered off into the jungle. It was as if tiger and cobra had gone their way together, though that, of course, was utterly impossible. During the next 2 weeks, these stories and more came into Bildapore, causing great consternation there, for the hunt, after carrying off far off into the great game preserve, had reversed itself and was now coming closer to the tiny native state. Chopra, the landowner who was acting in the Raja's absence, sent out reserves to meet the tiger god's advance, but most of them scattered in terror and took refuge with other hunting parties. Chopper returned to the palace and held a grim consultation with Princess Helena and Greylock. You know how these townsfolk are, complained Chopra. If you talk about a tiger, they see grass waving and leaves rustling everywhere. They got stripes before their eyes every time they blink. Princess Helena gave a relieved sigh and added, "Then you don't think that Bag Zaloom is really close by?" "On the contrary, he is very close," returned Chopra. "During the past few nights, the tiger has stolen up on guards outside the palace. He has knocked away their guns, and they have had to run for their lives. They have claw marks to prove it, and that is why the guards have been deserting one by one. But when the villagers look for the tiger, he has vanished completely as in the jungle." "Do you mean to say," said Greylock, "that Bag Zaloom goes back to the jungle by day and returns here at night, slipping through cordons each time?" "I mean exactly that," declared Chopra, "but I have word from Nayudu that he is bringing hunting parties closer in, so that by tomorrow night he should be able to waylay Bag Zaloom while the tiger god is going one way or the other." That same day, Greylock made the usual trip to Kalma's grave and talked to the fakir's followers. They too were aware of the tiger scare and were keeping close to their tents, which were well concealed among the trees and bushes beyond the brow of the hill. They agreed with Greylock that it was best to leave Kalma buried as he was, while they sat tight with loaded guns, ready to ambush Bag Zaloom if he prowled past their post. All that night, one lone recruit patrolled outside the main gateway of the palace, where other guards had been attacked and had fled. Towards dawn, Greylock was awakened by a wild, piercing cry. He grabbed his revolver and dashed out through the courtyard, where Chopra, coming from another wing of the palace, joined him, carrying a rifle. Outside the gateway, they found the new guard lying in a pool of blood, and farther off, Greylock saw a striped shape diving past the corner of an abandoned hut. Greylock took after it, blasting away with his revolver, and Chopra followed, but had no chance to use his rifle. In the uncertain light, it was impossible to trace the fugitive tiger through the brush beyond the hut. The killer was gone. For this time, a killer he was. When Greylock and Chopra returned to the guard, he was delivering his dying gasp. Bag Zaloom." The guard's gun lay a dozen feet away where he had lost it, while trying to ward off the attack. That the killer was a tiger was evident from claw marks that covered the victim's face and body, tearing deep into his throat. That the tiger must be Bag Zaloom seemed equally evident, for a strictly man-eating tiger would have carried away the human prey. This beast was simply a man-hater. And Greylock could now understand why many natives styled him the Evil One, and some had sought to appease Bag Zaloom by forming a secret tiger cult and worshipping him as a living tiger god. All the while, Bardu, the adept, had remained complacently seated in his favorite niche, from which not even the threat of Bag Zaloom could stir him. Unfortunately, Bardu had not witnessed the slaying of the guard, because, like the earlier attacks, it had taken place beyond the outside corner of the gateway. The lesser yogis and assorted sadhus all were gone. They had quickly decided to resume their pilgrimages when they first heard talk of the tiger god. On the hillock, Greylock talked with the grave watchers and found they had been alarmed by the gunfire, but had seen no sign of the tiger, which must have gone another way. When Greylock returned to the palace, he found that the last few servants, frightened by the guard's death, were packing and leaving. Princess Helena refused to stop them, saying that it was their privilege. So that afternoon, Chopra drove off in the Royal Model T, hoping to find Neudu and bring him and bring back any hunters that he could spare as palace guards. By evening, the only living persons in the palace were Greylock himself, Bardu the adept, and the Princess Helena. There were no gates. They had been removed by the peace-loving Raja years before, so Greylock helped himself to a big hunting rifle from the rack in the Raja's gunroom and took up a lone pistol with Juju on his shoulder in the moonlight of the big courtyard. Suddenly, a door opened and Princess Helena beckoned excitedly. There's somebody or something trying to come over the wall into the little back courtyard just behind my apartment. Greylock started through a passage towards a door to the back court. But Helena led him up a short flight of stairs to the right into her lighted dressing room. There, she pointed through a rear window down in the back court with its low outer wall. Greylock heard scratchy, scaly sounds from the gloom. Then Juju on his shoulder began a quick chatter. Greylock looked lightly down into the lighted corridor. Quickly, he told Helena. Bag Zaloom is with us. We must get away from here, and fast. I must bring my jewels, pleaded Helena. From a cabinet, she brought a dazzling array of diamonds, a trifling part of the Build-A-Poor hoard, and folded them into a large scarf. But I have one other thing still more precious. These. From the cabinet, she took the striped tiger figurine and that of the coiled cobra, placing one on each side of the table lamp. Now for something to put them in. Helena choked. She was looking toward the door. There at the top of the steps was the great head and shoulders of a huge tiger that could only be Bag Zaloom. Somehow the beast had unlatched a door from the rear court and now had them cornered, but the tiger's fierce yellow-eye glare was not for Princess Helena. It was directed towards Greylock, who quickly brought the rifle to aim, while Juju sprang from his other shoulder and darted to a corner, realizing that he, a mongoose, was no match for a tiger. Nor was Greylock. Before he could fire, the big beast sprang and batted the rifle barrel aside with one large paw. Greylock trained in trench warfare in World War I, reversed the gun and drove the butt end toward the tiger's snarling teeth. But the blow was only a glancing one. The tiger swung its paw at Greylock's head to bat him away, and as he dodged, the beast tried to knock over the lamp with the same stroke, but it came short of that too. Instead, the massive paw thudded squarely on the little clay tiger image, crushing it to powder. Helena screamed as she saw the effigy crumble. Then the tiger's paw came up and caught Greylock beneath the chin, but it felt more like a hard stroke from a fist that jarred his teeth as his head jolted back. Now Greylock, really dazed, found himself struggling not with a monstrous beast, but a human antagonist who kept telling him coolly, "Easy there, Greylock. Easy now. It's all right." And it was all right. As Greylock relaxed, he found himself looking into the face of the Raja of Build-A-Poor. Beyond him stood Helena, her face very pale. She gave an odd, sad smile as her father turned and asked, "That tiger image that I just crushed, who gave it to you?" "Kalma," replied Helena. "He said it would protect you from tigers." "I see." The Raja picked up the cobra image. "And this?" It was for Shaubar, to protect him against cobras." The word cobra suddenly stirred Juju. The mongoose came chattering from its corner and darted down the steps, while Raja shouted, "Stop him, Greylock, quick!" Greylock was too late. At the bottom of the steps, the mongoose shot through the now open back door and into the little walled court. Juju, too, had heard the scaly scraping sound that Greylock had noted earlier. Now Juju was springing from the weaving whitish hood of the great cobra. Forced to a corner, the snake was trying to rear higher, but the mongoose sprang to its neck, clutching tight with its claws, and was about to give the snake a fatal bite when the Raja arrived, still carrying the cobra image. The Raja flung the coiled effigy against the wall, where it smashed to bits. At that instant, the cobra seemed to rear higher, flinging the mongoose upward. Then the weird white hood was gone, and Juju chatter suddenly began again, this time in happy recognition as Shaubar stepped from the gloomy corner. Finding the mongoose on his shoulder, Shaubar rubbed his neck and spoke to the Raja. Just a few scratches, but no bites. Many thanks, Your Highness, for your timely assistance. At last we can be ourselves again. We still have work to do, rejoined the Raja. Let's hope we are not too late. Better get that rifle, Greylock. We may need it. The fantastic truth dawned on Greylock as he brought the rifle from the very room where he had struggled with the tiger that he had thought was Bag Zaloom. There was bewitchment in those clay figures. They had turned the Raja into a tiger and Shaubar into a cobra. Either that, or they had made them appear as such creatures to all other eyes. Yet Kalma, ever artful, had not lied when he said the statues gave protection. The Raja, as a tiger, could hold his own against other tigers. Shaubar, as a cobra, could cope with cobras. The Raja met Greylock at the bottom of the steps and gestured him toward the doorway to the big main courtyard with the comment, "Lead the way, Greylock. The princess has told me of your loyalty, and I am highly gratified that you stayed after so many others left. So you are still in charge." "Our worries should be over," rejoined Greylock. "Now that you are back, Your Highness, Chopra is due shortly with a crew of shikaris to handle the real Bag Zaloom, if he shows up again." Greylock broke off and motioned the others back. Stalking silently across the main courtyard was a tiger the exact size, indefinable in the uncertain moonlight, but its intent very plain. It was moving straight for Bardu, the motionless adept, who was still seated with crossed legs and outspread palms, in his familiar Padmasana posture. Greylock handed the rifle to the Raja. "Take this, Your Highness," he whispered. "You are a better tiger hunter than I could ever hope to be." Greylock drew his revolver as an emergency weapon, but the Raja smiled while raising the rifle to his own shoulder. "Weapons are unneeded," he said quietly. "I have told you that Bardu has the power of Vashti that can stop wild beasts in their tracks. Watch now, and you will see the true Mahatma demonstrate his mind power." The tiger stalked steadily towards Bardu's niche, unaware that other eyes were watching, for it was meeting only the adept's unflinching gaze. Then, with a savage spring, the striped form launched itself squarely upon the seated, defenseless figure of Bardu, intent upon the kill. The power that stopped the ferocious attack was not the adept's skill at controlling wild beasts, it was the power packed in the cartridge of the Raja's rifle. A gunshot clipped the killer in the middle of the spring, rolling him over in the courtyard. Greylock and Shaubar reached the motionless form ahead of the Raja. They didn't have to worry about whether it was still alive, for the tiger had literally come apart into portions. The dead killer was no tiger at all. The Raja had shot and killed a man who had been wearing a tiger's skin. and he was lying face down, and in his outstretched hand was a murderous weapon that he had used to strike down and slash human victims, sometimes fatally, as with the guard last night. The Raja arrived, realized the truth, and used a rifle butt to roll the dead killer face up in the moonlight. The witnesses stared at one another in new amazement. When they saw the features of Kalma, the fakir, who was supposedly undergoing a living burial in the state of Samadhi on the hilltop, they were still standing there, dumbfounded, when the royal car rolled in with Chopra at the wheel and a dozen shikaris brimming from its sides. The Raja ordered Greylock and Shalmar to head the expedition that went into immediate action. Their target was the encampment on the hillside, and they moved in so fast and quietly that with the shikaris, that they captured and disarmed Kalma's few followers in a matter of minutes. Beneath a bush just behind a tent, Greylock found a small tunnel leading straight into the fakir's empty grave. Once buried, Kalma had pushed open a loose side of the coffin and had wormed through a foot or so of earth into the secret outlet, which had enabled him to reach the tent and enter the back unseen. He had spent his long days in the comfort of the tent, not in the confines of the coffin, where he intended to return only when the time came for the casket to be dug up. Aside from faking a living burial and getting credit for a real one, Kalma had been able to rove the night masquerading as the killer tiger, Bag Zaloom, using a pronged hook to deliver wounds that looked as though they had come from tiger claws. While he frightened away the surrounding villagers, as well as the guards and servants from the Raja's palace, Kalma had been the fiendish leader of the secret cult that worshipped him as the tiger god. As to Kalma's main purpose, the Raja of Bildapur could easily explain that in the light of all that had happened back at the palace, the Raja analyzed the fakir's methods as well as his motives. Greylock, Chopra, and the Princess Helena listened. Shalbar stood by to confirm the data. Kalma. Okay. Kalma must have learned that the summons were due for Delhi, stated the Raja. So he went out and created a tiger scare, thus making two predictions come true. Once Shalbar and I were off in the jungle, he transformed us with the aid of those images, probably through the affinity of the talismans that we already carried. It was a case of actual bewitchment, the sort that has often been reported through the years, but which have been difficult to prove. Now we know that such things can really happen. And in this case, put in Helena, it must have happened while Kalma set fire to the powder on those images. Exactly, agreed the Raja, because I felt a burning here. He paused, pressing his hand to his chest while Shalbar promptly added, and I saw His Highness change into a tiger. His face began to glare with yellow eyes and snarling mouth. Then his hands changed to paws, his fingers to claws, and when I knew I would have to get him into the jungle, so I started from the tent only to get a burning sensation myself. And next, chuckled the Raja, Shalbar was a cobra hissing for me to follow him into the jungle. From then on, we beat our way back here together. It was more difficult for me with all those shikaris, thinking I was Bag Zaloom, and trying to trap me. Fortunately, I was one tiger who knew as much as any hunter, so I did the thing that tigers never do. Shalbar, who helped me in his nice cobra fashion. Like the time I struck at Neudu, I replied Shalbar. You made up for that, Your Highness, when you saved me from my own pet mongoose, Juju. I was lucky enough to smash that tiger image, affirmed the Raja. Then, of course, I realized that the cobra statue. Then I realized what the cobra statue means. While they were intact, we could not regain our human forms. That was why Kalma wanted them preserved. So you were still working. So you were still working in from the jungle, declared Greylock, and being mistaken for Bag Zaloom while Kalma was acting like a real killer here in Bildapur. No wonder no one could tell how the tiger managed to get back and forth between here and the jungle. But why did Kalma want to drive everyone away from the palace? So he could find the secret hiding place, returned the Raja, the treasure vault that contains all the fabled Bildapur diamonds that you yourself had said you wanted to see, that you would like to see. Kalma didn't find out that I knew where it was. Wait here. Kalma didn't find out that I knew where it was, put in Helena, because Mr. Greylock told him that only two people knew where they were kept. He said your father was one person and Shalbar was the other. And that, Greylock said to the Raja, was what you told me, Your Highness. I told you that only two men knew where they were, corrected the Raja. I purposely refrained from mentioning Princess Helena. I'm glad now that I did. With no one to ask, Kalma had to frighten everyone away from the palace until he found only one spot still guarded. He knew that was where the vault would be, but it forced him to show his hand. The Raja gestured his own hand across the courtyard to where Bardu, the adept, was still seated in what seemed an eternal pose. That alcove is the entrance to the diamond vault, exclaimed the Raja. So Shalbar and I decided to let Bardu take up his long contemplative vigil there. Bardu himself does not know that he is guarding all the wealth of Bildapur. The Raja walked over and spoke to the old adept, who unlimbered from his lotus position and stepped from the niche, the first time that Greylock had ever seen him do so. Shalbar stepped forward, stooped, and lifted a perfectly fitting slab that was set in the alcove. Below was a stairway leading down beneath the palace. Okay, we have been reading for a little bit too long, but we will finish this up in the next one. If you like this content, make sure we've been reading from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson. And if you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, want to support me in any way, if you want to join the Discord server, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.